Okay, it is 12 noon on Tuesday, Pacific Standard Time in Los Angeles, California, and on the West Coast. And this is the Architects and Heroes live stream show. I am here with Jack from SubSensory, Jack Coleman from Portland, from the PDX, from the West Coast, just a little further north of us. So, Jack, welcome to the show. How are you, man?
Thanks. I'm, all things told, I'm hanging in there.
Yeah, it's really funny. This whole live stream thing has just become an extension of what I've done with Architects and Heroes, which has been in different incarnations, a record label, a content provider, a blog, a podcast, everything digital media. And I thought, when lockdown happened, the biggest thing that I was really interested in from a music perspective, obviously from electronic music perspective and beyond, has been, really finding out what, who my personal, favorite artists, what they're doing, how they're coping, what's happening during this period. And honestly, it made me think about what their lives look like outside of the sort of the Venn diagram that we had at clubs and making music and all that. So, but thank you so much. So tell me, a little bit about what you've been up to. I mean, I guess for those that are, our community, our core group of techno heads, for the most part, know you and know your experience. I mean, you've been doing this for a minute, but for people that are outside of that realm, talk a little bit about your background, what you do, and a little bit about your musical life.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm based in Portland, Oregon. I've been doing, electronic music related work for 20 years ish, and a lot of folks know me in the region, the West Coast and elsewhere, for my label SubSensory Recordings, which has been around for about 10 years. We've released 100 EPs to date. I think we hit 101 this year.
That's awesome.
And, that includes a lot of locally grown talent, folks like myself. I started the label as an outlet for myself, but of course, over time, it grew into something, to include a lot of other local artists, as well as some familiar names, folks like Adam J and Angel Alanis and Mita and a number of folks that we've worked with over the years that have maybe more kind of brand recognition. But we've kept it going as a small independent label that's really just kind of focused on putting out the music we want to put out. And, in addition to the label, a lot of folks in the Portland and Northwest area know the SubSensory events, which have been pretty consistent in bringing techno talent to Portland. Portland's not a big techno scene by international standards, but we have a really cool, passionate, small-ish local community of techno heads that come out and support the shows. So, in the last couple of years, we've done artists like Anastasia Christensen, we've done Henning Bear, we've done Drum Cell, Mike Denart, just a bunch of folks that we brought to town, Noncompliant, and many others who, maybe Portlanders wouldn't typically have gotten a chance to see some of these artists. And so, in fact, of course, we had some big stuff in the works when everything fell apart with COVID. We had ROs coming. We had Un coming, who was going to make his Portland debut. So, it's really, we're certainly in sort of a pause mode right now.
Yeah, and that is what I think what makes this time wholly unique. I never in a million years thought that there would be that live streaming would be sort of the channel by which people really start to engage with electronic music and deal with that sort of side of things. I mean, it's, I guess, what is it that, they say necessity, is the mother of invention. Just really quick, I just want to do a shout out to Emily and Ian. Hey guys, saw that you were up in the feed, so hi. But to have that sort of engagement online, I mean, we're going through a whole different type of experience here, where the channels are, they're digital. Here we are, we're doing this through a live stream. You're in Portland, I'm in LA. It's the whole system is kind of changed. And I thought it was interesting. A few weeks back, I had Sean Horton on the show. who's, you know, the Decibel Festival founder and operator for 15, you know, plus years. And he was saying that, you know, the silver lining to the whole streaming piece is that now there's this extra channel that people are going to have the infrastructure for when they move forward. Yeah, but we're in this limbo right now. And you, as a, you know, taking off your producer and DJ hat and putting on your promoter hat a little bit, you know, how are you navigating this space right now with the SubSensory events? And what are your thoughts about how you want to spend your time during this period?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question. I'm going to be totally honest and say that COVID has really stopped, for at least for a long period of time, it really stopped me in my tracks. I mean, you know, I have a family with 2 kids. We had to shift to managing distance learning for their education. They're a 11-year-old and a 9-year-old here in public school. You know, everybody was, you know, when everything first kind of shut down, a lot of folks are right out of the gate with live streaming. And I was, you know, I've invested in a number of areas with the label, whether it's, you know, our web presence, our social media, you know, the artists, the releases, the video, you know, all of these things, but I was not prepared for the live streaming kind of concept. And so it did take me a few months to, find the motivation and, you know, desire to kind of start to look at what I can do in that space. And B, to put it all together. I mean, again, I just, you know, it's just a new skill. I mean, there's this joke about how artists and label owners have over the years had to become more and more adept at doing all sorts of different things, right? So it's like, you know, maybe it's not really this simple, but let's say in the old school, you know, you had to have some records and know how to mix. And now you got to do, you know, social media, content creation, video production, you know, public relations, you name it, right? And I've embraced all of those things over the years and tried to teach myself. And in fact, I work professionally as a marketer and in communications. So it's kind of been good for me because music forces me to adapt and learn the latest thing. And so it was sort of similar with the streaming. And I think initially for me, I really had to take a look at where we are with COVID and the label and my own personal needs, and just kind of think about what I need. And what I really settled on is I need to spend time with my music collection and like sort of the release of DJing when I can't do that in a club environment in front of people. You know, I wanted to be able to recreate that in my home. So, you know, I've done a number of streams. My concept for what I'm doing has really just been around me and one other artist in the label, but named Demux, but primarily me. And that I just basically said, look, when I go play in a club in modern times, I'm probably playing on CDJs, working with my digital collection. I have to kind of approach it in a certain way. But if I can DJ for a community of listeners from my home studio, what's really different is I have access to my entire music collection, and that includes my record collection, which is, is fairly significant, and then of course my digital collection, which is practically unmanageable. It's so large. And so being able to the sets I started doing, the live sets, I called them unscripted sessions, and the idea was literally like get going, play for an hour or two, try not to mess up and not have a plan along the way, and that, grab a record, grab a track off my computer, whatever I can do to keep it rolling, and really kind of test myself in a setting that's maybe not, you don't have the same pressure as being in front of a crowd, but it's a different pressure of having that red recording light on. And so in a lot of ways it's been, I've done, I think, 6 of those, and it's not like I've reached some incredibly large global audience, but we've had good listenership. And for me, it's just been personal. It's been about getting to know my music collection a little better, and and particularly on the vinyl, digging back into my collection and really identifying kind of the music that I've collected over the past 20 years that still works and motivates me, and maybe perhaps is something that would distinguish what I'm doing from folks who are just selecting from the newer digital stuff. So it's been a sort of a meditation for me. Label wise, I really just, it's, right before COVID dropped, I released the 100th release on SubSensory. That was my first full-length album called Atomic Lines, 10 tracks.
Congratulations on that. That's a big deal. That first one, that's awesome.
It meant a lot to me. It's just, you know, like there was this great momentum there, and we had all these events coming up, and then just, I don't know, it just fell apart. And so I really have paused on the label side. I'm really just, I did release a remix EP that is remixes of the album, but you know, I'm not sure what direction I want to go with SubSensory as we get into their, you know, the 102nd, 103rd, and 104th release and so on. And I'm not sure how the changes in the world are going to fuel that. So I'm really kind of regrouping and thinking about where to go from here.
You know what? I think that's very, very common right now. And a lot of the conversations I've had with different artists and musicians, it all kind of, the pause has been a very positive thing for a lot of people. For some people, it's been a negative thing. When you're kind of taken off your trajectory of what you're working on creatively, you know, it does make you kind of reassess a lot of things. And I think if it weren't for COVID, I don't think the attention to Black Lives Matter, to the extent that it's been there, would have gotten the momentum that it's been there. So yes, Black Lives Matter, 100%. We're all behind that. And I think that's a positive kind of extension of what's happened as a result of kind of people being aware and having the downtime to be able to do that. And just real quick, Alfred Ramirez and Sergio, what's up, guys? Thanks for joining us. You know, one of the things that I think has been a really fascinating thing. I mean, if you think about the technical implications of it, I think you nailed it on the head. I mean, I'd never streamed before. I think I'd been on one or two live. I've been a guest on those things, but never had I hosted and had to set up and deal with the technical challenges and the interfaces and sort of the, you know, and I did my the Isolator and Friends live stream with Claire in San Francisco, and that was like a whole revelation. I mean, there was so much that it was Claire and Peter, and there was just so much that I had to kind of adjust to in this new world with the audio portion of things and the interface. It's just so much that had to go on, and I was pretty happy with the results. But it definitely has forced me to kind of create stuff that deals with kind of where we are right now. You adapt, right? So like you said earlier, you got to be your own PR person. You've got to be your own technical, you know, support. You have to be your own roadie. I mean, if you're in this electronic music, independent music game in any way, shape, or form, you're pretty much doing all the shit yourself. You're going to lug your own gear. You're going to set things up. You're going to do your own sound check. You're going to be your own security, you know, until you hit that threshold of whatever. And then to have it all come to a screeching halt like this, and it really becomes more about kind of a more insular experience, which I don't know about you, but I come from the sort of, you know, IDM world where most of the cats were, you know, buried in their studios with hoodies on even before they left the house, you know. So there's something very, I think, appealing also just about hunkering down in the lab and having that type of energy to be part of the music. And but at the same time, it's a radically different proposition when it kind of flips everything on its head, and your whole momentum is based on some conditional responses from your environment, right? So that is a huge. That's a huge shift and a huge change. And I think to kind of circle back a little bit and to talk about that in the context of social justice. I mean, I don't think first of all, can we just all agree that 2020 is a shitty year? Okay, let's keep that as a baseline, but then say, from a social justice perspective, from a let's call it a political awareness perspective, from a reassessment of kind of where we are in the context of things as creatives, as artists, as musicians, what is it that you feel that can be done to kind of move the needle in a better direction?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting. First of all, of course, you know, I'm here in Portland, and Portland has been a hot button kind of topic in the national news as we've had over 100 consecutive days of protests for social justice and Black Lives Matter and police accountability here in Portland. And it's been really interesting as a kind of where I'm at in life. I wouldn't consider myself an activist in my actions. I consider that I have, an activist sort of mindset, and I agree with the causes, but I've also been really, frankly, scared about going out into public and exposing my family and the fairly tight circle of family and older adults that we have around us to COVID potentially. And so I haven't really felt I can participate in the protests physically. And so, I've been looking at different things that I can do. And, that includes, I've given, what I can to groups like the National BLM Organization, the Portland PDX Bail Fund, which helps protesters who are arrested during the protests with bail, supporting the NAACP where I can. And more recently, there's a group that's come together under the support of a fellow here in Portland named Peter, whose Rhythm Nation organizing team is trying to build momentum within the music community around advocating for local issues. And I'm really just so impressed with Peter's energy and his organization. And he was a part of the Bernie Sanders campaign and the digital team there, and has actually transitioned to, at least did some work on the Biden campaign, and is now working with Portland electronic music artists in this community to try to organize folks around local issues, which I think, so that's one area that I think is really important to consider, is that the national election matters. Certainly, it's very important. However, like here in Portland, for example, the state's going to go for Biden no matter what I do in terms of my vote for president. So we need to start looking also at the local issues wherever we live and try to at least educate ourselves on those local issues so that we can make a difference, a more tangible difference in our own communities. Because, ultimately, Joe Biden or some other person isn't going to come in on a stallion and save us all from the issues we have. We need to act. And so I really want to give Peter a shout out for his hard work to organize folks. I haven't been able to be as active with that group as I'd like, but they've continued to provide content and education around some of the specific issues. And I, pushed out a post about that today, for example, because of course today is the first presidential debate, and we're going to all be feeling pretty anxious or mad right. or whatever it may be. Yeah. And so, national politics matter, and we need to get 45 out of office, but local politics and issues matter too. And if you're letting your mind be filled with rage over the national situation and letting that distract you from the local issues, you're doing a disservice to your community.
Yeah, I think that is a very, very wise statement, because I think, it's like the old adage in progressive circles about think globally and act locally. I don't think there can be any real tangible change. I mean, I think the abstraction of politics from, what's happening in Washington, D.C. versus what's happening in my community, I don't know if who I vote for president is going to impact that pothole that's down the street at my, in my neighborhood. And I think when we talk about, the electronic music community in particular, there's just a DIY boots on the ground type of mentality that most people that I know over the years who've been involved in electronic music have, right? So it's like, let's find the warehouse, let's get the sound system, let's, right. There's a very hands-on approach to it, as opposed to a lot of like, I know a lot of punk bands and indie rock bands and stuff are definitely in that vein as well. But there's something about the electronic music community that is kind of what I like to call like the 360 view of kind of getting your event together and getting and organizing. And there's something very tactical about that group of people that I've met over the years. And when you kind of take that parallel between sort of like, you know, the OG ravers who might have done break-in parties back in the day, and you look at BLM, and you look at the kind of the local issues when it comes to that. I mean, so many for years and years and years, art and music has always played a pretty integral part of kind of shaping and forming the political dialogue between people, and there's really I think an opportunity. And I have had conversations with people about building intentional communities and building out with the current existing networks ways of kind of supporting each other in that way. How do you see the overlap of what you've done, if at all? But how do you see the overlap of what you've done with SubSensory and your work as an artist, and kind of infusing that somehow into the political ecosystem at a local level?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, I think I'm lucky in that maybe I have a little bit more of a platform to stand on if I want to share knowledge and information with members of my community. I mean, you know, I think that it's also important to understand, and sadly, this isn't universally the case, but for me and for a lot of people from our generation and more recent generations too, you know, getting involved with electronic music was happening because this was a community that accepted and kind of celebrated the freaks and geeks, right? I mean, and so, you know, a lot of us have the same kind of perspective around, you know, LGBTQ issues, equality issues, things like that, because intrinsically we think about fairness and inclusion as kind of part of our ethos. And so I think that's really kind of where that connection often lies, in that you see a lot of folks who are kind of aligned around those ideals, and those ideals can then translate to policy ideas. So some of the issues that the Rhythm Nation team is organizing around locally is there's a drug decriminalization and rehabilitation measure here in Oregon, for example, that, you know, instead of punishment, we're going to be focused on, you know, treatment. And that, of course, the science is there. That's the way to handle it. But addiction is still, there's so much stigma around drug addiction, and people still want to criminalize it and treat it like a crime problem rather than an addiction or social problem. And so, you know, that's an example of one issue that a lot of folks are aligned on. There's also a psilocybin therapy measure, first in the nation, actually, where Oregon is looking to legalize a psilocybin therapy approach to things like trauma, I believe, and cancer patients and things like that. So again, very progressive, and obviously people in the electronic music community that may have been exposed to psychedelics and other, you know, recreational drugs and have found that there may be some, you know, obviously there are problems with overuse of any right. drug, but right there could be some potential benefits when used in the right setting. Those kinds of ideas are when you think about them, they align so closely with the world that we've experienced within electronic music. And so it seems like a pretty natural link to advocate for those on the policy level. Same with things like, you know, equality, you know, those kinds of issues. I mean, because again, it ties into the ethos. Now, sadly, you know, we're also finding that a lot of our brethren in the dance music community maybe weren't there for the right reasons to begin with, and this time has exposed some of that. But by and large, what I'm seeing is a lot of people aligned around a similar set of ideals and hoping to see real change.
Absolutely. Which I have to say that there has been some liberation and sort of flipping the lights on, as it were, and exposing people within that community for who they were. And not, look, I don't know necessarily if sort of the political element of whatever it is within, I think there's a base, for me personally, and I can only speak for myself, but I think there's a baseline of like mutual respect, right? At the end of the day, I know there's so much we can dig into here in terms of like platforms and how they amplify messages and the kind of response mechanism we have to those platforms. But at the end of the day, I have not seen one person comment on a Facebook thread that has fundamentally changed the original author's mind. Like at no point am I gonna be like, oh my Lord, I'm so glad you pointed out the flaws of my logic. Thank you for letting me know that. Now I've had an epiphany, and my my thinking has gone 360. That was originally, I mean, I'm a user experience designer by trade.
Right.
So I know what it's like to, frankly, try to digitally manipulate people through screens to get them to buy shit, like that's kind of what and I don't want to be crass about it, because there's a much bigger conversation to have there. But at the end of the day, the people that own the platforms, and this is another big part of the conversation I had with Dor Wand, who is, was worked with Cold Cut for years and years, and Ninja Tune, and now does Fault Radio in San Francisco. We had our session a couple weeks ago, and he was saying, these platforms inherently, we are the products of those platforms. We are the product of Facebook. We are the product of Twitter. We are the product of these streaming platforms. And there's been so much consternation around like control and manipulation and copyright laws and all these different elements that kind of go in, even to the live stream thing where people are getting their music cut off or whatever. And to really, again, kind of as a community, as sort of the international electronic music community, to talk about things like these are our goals, right? And back in the day, circa like mid 90s, let's say, right, when there was a lot of like Mondo 2000 and sort of the early kind of people that wanted to create autonomous communities around dance music or the rave scene, which was very much like a hippie counterculture idea. But I think there's something to being able to control the platform of which your community is communicating in a way. I think social media has been great for connecting us together, but I think maybe it's time for an exodus here, because at the end of the day, we're just kind of sitting. We're sitting as products on these platforms, but we are these independent, kind of autonomous groups of people that really just want to share our music with each other. The platform just happens to be the way to do it. Josh Garrett, hey what's up? So where I'm going with this is that thinking about Facebook or thinking about the Spotify or any of these platforms. Also, can I just say shout out to Bandcamp for their Fridays and being like the most pro musical platform ever. Yay, Bandcamp. You guys rock. Thank you for supporting independent musicians. What are your thoughts around kind of, again, because I've known you, for a few years, and you are such a hard worker when it comes to kind of building the community and connecting the dots within things. What are your thoughts about sort of kind of creating this sort of more intentional community around it? Or does that go above and beyond what you think, you're
it's tough. I mean, gosh, when I think about social media, it's like, obviously we all have that kind of tortured relationship with it. But, during the pandemic, the red phone is ringing. What?
I'm going to go ahead and take that off the hook. Sorry, whoever this is. I'm live streaming at the moment. This is a red phone. The intention, it is a real phone. Not just for show. No. Everything here has a purpose. I will skate. I'm going to skateboard, play my guitar, and be on the phone at the same time in a moment. It's going to be awesome. Anyway, apologies. We will have a hotline moving forward, though.
I was hoping, like, hey, listener call. What's up?
As soon as I can figure out how to patch my landline. Yes, landline.
Calling to wish me a happy birthday, I think.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I'm so sorry. It is your birthday today. Jack Coleman, happy birthday and congratulations. Welcome to legal drinking age. We're glad to have you. No, sincerely, I thank you for doing this on your birthday too. Happy birthday. So I digress. Apologies.
No, it's all good. I guess, like I said, everybody has a tortured kind of relationship with social media. And I find myself, especially during the pandemic, drawn to it because I am seeking like human interaction and connection. And like, I have these urges to like do a thing on social media just because I've been trying to understand that. And I really have concluded that a lot of it is just me seeking connection. But the trouble for me too is that like I don't have the biggest, I don't have 5,000 friends on Facebook, but I probably have 2,500, and there are people I've worked with, there are people I've done music with, and just engaging sometimes on the broader social media platform, the audience is just too diverse, meaning broad, meaning like I can share all my techno geek stuff, but half the people are going, what is wrong with this guy? Is he ever going to grow up? And then, and then there are some people that get it. And then it's weird. So I really, where I've found benefit and pleasure is in the kind of the focus groups on social media. So I admin a PDX techno group on Facebook. That's the intention of the group is everybody is based in or has a close relationship with Portland. I don't let folks in from other communities because it's just not focused enough. It started just for me and a couple of friends to shoot the shit about techno, but it's not huge. I think it's 800 members now, but that's a lot of folks who have some connection with Portland, who have some care for techno music. And honestly, it's been the most meaningful place for me on social media to really engage and talk about ideas or share. Like I've done things there recently that I stopped doing years ago because it felt like a waste of time, like sharing a track that I'm working on, that's not published, like that. As I was trying to get my music out there and release on bigger labels, the advice is always, keep all your music under wraps, don't share it with anybody until it's perfect, and because labels don't want anything that's already been out there in the public, and nobody cares anyways, and that's sort of all decent advice, but like I'm not getting what I want out of music that, like if I'm not able to share it and get some reaction from people. I mean, yeah, I enjoy making music, but I also enjoy engaging with people through that music. And so those kinds of spaces where you can be a little more focused and not have to read the horrible opinions of your friend's grandma or whatever, and it's a lot more meaningful to me. And it's true, right? You post on Facebook and it's like, or you see your friends.
Whoa, Jack, what? I'm so confused. This is your aunt. I don't understand.
Yeah,
what is that?
Yeah,
it's scary. It's scary when you're
I'm like, really? Maybe not.
That's okay. First off, there's a lot to unpack there. I love the fact that you have something that's very specifically focused on a local community, and it really it makes me want to kind of dive into that a little bit here. I spend some time in San Francisco as well. I probably spend about 20 to 30% of my time there. Claire and Ross are my roommates, actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So what's up, Claire?
Hey.
So at the end of the day, like, building that community up and then connecting the dots with different communities is something I think that you've been really great at. And there's just it's just such a different proposition these days. But there's also something pretty astonishing about having, for me, my experience was I'm a consultant. So when all this hit in March, the company that was my primary company that I was working with, they literally shut their doors. They went out of business. And so I find myself with like, okay, well, I've got all this free time. I've got, and I immediately, I had started working on a new Zygote record. And, to talk about what you had said earlier about building a community or having that exchange with people through platforms, the Zygote project for me has always been very collaborative over the years. A lot has been independent, but a lot has been, I've worked with different producers and co-producers. And right now I'm working with Mark Pistol from Consolidated and Meat Beat Manifesto and Hercules and Love Affair on this new record. And it's so exciting to work with somebody who, he's just fucking amazingly talented. It's just a really talented guy. But B, to have that exchange with somebody, and I'm not going to lie, his studio is so dope. Room 5 studio is just, oh my God, it's so amazing. I just can't, it's just like it's completely, it's like a geek fantasy world in his Room 5, and I love it. I might have to book something again soon. I'm jonesing, man. But all this to say, the exchange of ideas, the feedback loop that you get from your trusted sources, all of these different elements, I think, come into play when you're talking about building community, whether it's face to face or whether it's virtual, and whatever the situation will be once we go back into whatever was normal life before. I just don't see things. I mean, even if we had a vaccine that were to be out tomorrow, I don't see our community coming back together in the same way that it did before. but I actually see it almost better in some ways, because I feel like, and I'm not knocking this, but I think electronic music culture has been so supersized and diluted and become pop, and there's a lot of confusion outside of different communities about what electronic music is, or the history of it, or any of that. I really feel like there's going to be kind of a return to this community-based, almost underground vibe that for me was the most exciting about it in the first place.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, just to, actually what was happening here in Portland before the pandemic was along those lines. And it was incredible. So just to give you a little background, Portland over the years has really kind of, after the end of the whole rave era and the big warehouses and all that, Portland has really kind of lived and died on its just the few venues that are available that literally let people do techno music, because unfortunately, it's not necessarily a big money maker for those venues. I mean, when done right, it can work, and we made it work 100 times, right? But over the past couple of years, a number of promoters in a few different kind of realms, but crossing between house and techno and disco and electro, we've all kind of been connected, and we've all been cross-pollinating with each other over the years, and it sort of emerged organically. But people, a number of these promoters got together and mutually invested in this wonderful sound system that would be used for all of these private events. And it started to be that there were these underground events, sometimes 2-3 a month, happening at a limited number of small venues where we were able to do these kind of, they're not entirely private, but semi-private events where you have a capacity limit of, say, 100 or 150 people, great sound system, a couple DJs that play all night, really taking it to that kind of, you have to know somebody to know about it model. You have to be connected. And it's, that the intent isn't to be like exclusive and snobby. The intent is to keep out problems and keep it to a community that really appreciates the music. And the last few events before the shutdown, I mean, we did one with about the capacity was 150, and we hit it. And we couldn't do more than that because of the space. Private warehouse, that sound system I'm talking about. We had Brian Kasanick from the Bunker come down and play like a 5-hour set. People hands in the air at 6 a.m. Just like, I mean, it's the best. Some of the best energy I've felt at an event in Portland since those early kind of heyday, years. And this was happening not just with us, but with several other crews that were doing these events, Faceless, and Spend the Night, and Occasion Vibration, and all of these crews working really closely together. And I mean, I just it felt like the sky was the limit, and we just had so much energy, and it was really hard to see that all just kind of fall flat as the pandemic hit. And that sound system's not cheap, and but I didn't invest in it personally, but I know that it's sitting there, probably deserves to be used,
collecting dust.
Yeah, so I mean, at the same time, everybody who is behind all those events is very aligned around the fact that none of us are willing to take any chances, and none of us are going to be the first person to go out and do events after there's a vaccine or the world changes in some way where it's safe. We're all being really cautious. We all care about the health and well-being of the community, and we're not going to be the ones to go out and take any chances on that. But I do think if we reach a point where it's safe to gather again, there are going to be some fucking amazing parties.
That is really, first of all, I think it's fantastic that you're that is what's happening in Portland, because to me that is such a big part of what's missing in these communities. And I grew up in Oklahoma, and there was a significant underground presence there. Like, you wouldn't think Oklahoma at that period of time would have had a lot, but there really was a lot going on. And then I moved to Dallas. I went to college in Dallas. I went to SMU in Dallas, and that's when it was like, oh wow, okay, because you've got Blixaboy, you've got Convection, you've got Cygnus, you've got all of these guys in Dallas that have been really pushing it. And then Hazy Days Collective, which JT Donaldson came from, and just a bunch of Fair Park Records and DJ Red Eye, and you've got the history of the Start Club in Dallas. So there really was sort of a feeder that would go into different communities to do that. But I just think there is something about that model that you're talking about of getting your friends together, having and building a community of people, and then letting things kind of organically happen from there. I think.
One thing that's really interesting too, I think, about Portland and that this period I'm describing is, I mean, traditionally there's been a lot of ill will between promoters and communities and a lot of competition. And, I think that's probably a product of, kind of a limited amount of resources, limited amount of crowd. It's not always a profitable kind of venture. But for whatever reason, and it's interesting because I didn't know any of these promoters. These people weren't my friends before. It's not that I wasn't friends with them. It's just I didn't know them. I had no background with them. But we all kind of, I think, gained each other's trust and respect over a number of years because we were working in some of the same clubs. And so just seeing this collaboration and this openness, we all shared a Google Calendar where we made sure we weren't, screwing each other over on dates. And for the first time, and Portland has tried these things over the years with varying results, but this is the first time I really, over that past year, I really saw it working. And it was like we were all aligned. We were all pushing a sort of a similar vision, even though every crew has different music, different, residents and stuff like that. And there were times when we'd end up competing with one another, right? But it was just, I don't know, it just felt so different than some of the kinds of stab each other in the back kind of vibes that I've seen.
There are so many horror stories of like back in the day when people were like, I'm going to call cops on your illegal party or whatever. And, blowing people's shit up. And it's, it's just funny because my sincere hope is that one extension of what we're doing now in this time where we do have this downtime or a little more downtime to kind of think and reflect and really consider other human beings that inhabit the space that we're in, is that we have some level of consciousness about how to move forward and how to create community in a different way. That isn't so much of a competition as it is a cooperative effort that I think sometimes it's, and this is something I've had multiple conversations with people about. I think we get so locked into what is happening in and around us, not into it, but we become oblivious to the systems that we live in at some point, right? And we have all of these social, quote unquote, social contracts that become ingrained in our lives, but we don't know necessarily. I mean, look, I will say if I'm pulling up to a red light, I'm not going to run you over in the crosswalk. We have an unspoken agreement there and a law, I'm sure. But, at the end of the day, that's a extreme example, but there are all of these different mechanisms, some oppressive mechanisms that I think, we as a community have been able to circumvent over the years out of necessity, frankly, too. When you're not getting booked at clubs, well, what are you going to do? Well, we're going to rent a warehouse and we're going to DIY. We're going to do it ourselves. And but my hope is that it really extends, that the overlap between like the political climate, the social justice change, the music industry as a whole. Look, at the end of the day, everybody I know in this world is very, they're the PR, they're the artists, they're everything. But my hope is that this does bring about a shift and a better focus on what it means to be in community with those who are our comrades, Yeah,
definitely.
So just to shift gears a little bit here. So tell me about, you've got this full-length record, your first full-length record that you've put out recently. And I know that it's been on a little bit of a hiatus in terms of how you were going to promote it and deal with it, but what are your plans, for the next steps in terms of your production and your DJing?
Yeah, so you know, gosh, over the past couple of years, one of the big shifts for me was moving more toward live production, live performance. And so I did start doing my first live performances only in like 2018. I've been exclusively DJing for so long, and I never really thought I had a need for live performance. And it was a great opportunity for me because it kind of changed my workflow in the studio, to work around kind of more flexible, performable ideas rather than just tracks that are laid out, right? And I don't know quite how this happened, but I guess as I was working on my live material, I really found that the material I was creating was too limited in scope. I mean, I could play a set of all of my 4/4 kind of techno stuff, and there wasn't enough variety there to really make it as interesting as I want. I mean, I think people responded really great to my live sets. I'm really proud of them. There's a few recordings out there that I think are definitely solid. But it really led me to start exploring some other ideas and how I can incorporate different styles that are sort of techno adjacent into my production. I've always played, house and electro and, harder techno and Chicago stuff. I mean, I like to cover the full palette of techno with my DJing, but I would say that my production hasn't fully reflected that. And so it kind of opened the door for me to start doing more kind of breakbeat and electro stuff. And that is, I spent a lot of time on that over the past year. I'm sitting on a cache of what I think are really solid electro style tracks. I don't even know what to do with them. I actually do have a release scheduled on a new label that's forming, that's going to be all pretty much focused on electro. The label is called IDEO, but they're just now getting started, and it sounds like it's going to be a pretty impressive project. So I am excited about that. We'll have more on that in the end of the year, I think. But I started creating all this electro stuff, and then more recently, I've been doing kind of incorporating like garage and breaks and techno elements to try and develop some other kinds of crossbreeds of music, and it's been really fun. And again, since I'm not really under any pressure to release anything right now, I've just been able to kind of go where the production takes me. I created a different moniker for myself called Devices. It's D.Vices. That'll be the name under which that first stuff comes out, and I'm hoping to use it as a platform to kind of chart a little bit of a different direction, not to like totally separate from my former artist persona as Jack. I fully intend to continue doing that, but I wanted to kind of have a little bit of an opportunity for a fresh start. And so I don't know where that's going to take me, and it's a little uncomfortable at times to spend a lot of time writing music and not really have a plan for it. That's something I've never done. I'm the opposite of a lot of my friends and contacts who produce music. Like, people have a hard time like getting ideas down and done, and like that's like a superpower for me. Like, I write tracks, I get them done. Like, I can do that. But it's like now, but I was doing that primarily. It was driven because I had a release schedule, or I was doing a remix for a label or whatever, right?
Right.
Now with absent of all that, it's just sort of like me doing music, I don't know, for myself and my kids and my partner.
Sure. No. I get it.
And then one other kind of cool thing that I don't know, this just reminded me because I mentioned my kids, but I was giving Ableton lessons to a number of folks here in the Portland community, teaching electronic music production one-on-one in my studio through the later part of 2019 and into 2020 before the pandemic. And I really enjoyed that. I had like 5 or 6 regular students, and it was great. And, of course, I haven't let anyone in my studio in a long time, and I haven't really felt motivated to try to make that happen, virtually. I don't know. It just doesn't feel the same. So, but my son, who's 11, has expressed an interest in learning how to use the music production tools, and he plays piano. And so one of my big things over the past 2 months, or I guess he started about 7 weeks ago with he asked me to start giving him classes. And man, he's 11, and like watching him learn, and he's a bright kid, no doubt, you know, kind of gifted in the science and math area, but watching the pace at which he's learning at 11 years old, you know, I fully can accept that, you know, in 6 months he might, or tomorrow he might go, Dad, I'm bored of this, I don't like this. But man, if he were to stick with it, holy shit. The things that I could do if I had another 11 years of production under my belt, because I started in my 20s, you know. So so that's been so rewarding, and like he's just up and running. It's fun to work with him too, because he's classically trained with piano and I'm not. So, you know, like just he can just bang it out in a way that's kind of, it's, you know, it's fun to watch. He's not doing techno. He's doing his kind of own unique kind of electronic style. But
and I think that's amazing. So we will be on the lookout for D-Vice. Really hyped to actually hear that, because that's like electro is, you know, electro is my to me electro is like the Venn diagram, you know, pre-Africa, like that's the connecting tissue between like hip hop and electronic music in general. But so I know that you have a hard stop here soon, Jack. So first of all, happy birthday, my man. I wish you a much better year moving into this next phase. 2, we will be on the lookout for D-Vice, the new moniker of all of the stuff that you're going to be doing that's more breakbeat and electro oriented. 3, Jack, you know, I actually just finished a DJ mix that's going to be going out on Gold Code's show, the Omakase radio show on KUCI. Crawl is featured prominently in that mix. So thank you. Yeah,
like flew under the radar, and I was just listening to that the other day. I should give a quick plug too. On Saturday, I'm doing a live stream DJ set for Minimal Detroit. It's been kind of an organization that's popped up pretty prominently recently with a lot of great live sets, and I believe associated with Terrence Dixon. And so anyways, I'm doing a live set on Saturday this week. It's 3 p.m. Pacific, so that's 6 p.m. Eastern time. And they asked if I could do a vinyl set, and that's great. I just picked up a bunch of new and used vinyl. I'm excited to give that a spin.
Awesome. All right. Well, send me the link. We'll definitely put it out there. Jack, thank you so much for joining the live stream today. We really appreciate it. I cannot wait until we are able to get back to seeing each other face to face. But guys, this has been Jack from SubSensory Records. Now D-Vice. Good stuff, man. Hey, Devices?
Yes.
Devices. All right. Well, we'll get all the info on that, and we're going to be reposting these archive shows as well on the Architects and Heroes website within the next few weeks. So we'll gather all the links, gather all the information, and thank you so much. Happy birthday, and be safe up in Portland, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. Thank you, and thanks guys for watching.
Bye.